So the top story, Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg earlier today unveiled a new support package pledging to cut energy bills for businesses by a half. Following an announcement for caps on household energy bills, this new scheme, starting on the 1st of October, will effectively put a maximum price on the cost of electricity and gas charged to businesses.
But many firms arguing it'll do little to help them through one of the toughest winters ahead, and it's just for 6 months too. But here's what the Business Secretary had to say about it.
What we needed now, immediately, quickly, was something simple that would give people confidence through the winter. What we will have is a review in 3 months' time, which will allow us to see that we are giving support in the right places and that we can ensure that continued support, if that's necessary, is directed at where it needs to go.
Well, in response, Labour saying the plan lacks detail on how much that it will cost, who will pay for it indeed. Earlier we spoke to the Shadow Business Minister, Bill Esserson, and this is what he told us.
This is a huge challenge, and what we need is that level of detail from Jacob Rees-Mogg. And what we actually need is, rather than, as the government appears to be doing, setting up customers, both households and businesses, for long-term higher energy bills to pay for this extra borrowing, what we need is the windfall tax on oil and gas companies, which is a much fairer way of doing this, and it's the right place to go to first.
Joining us in the studio for expert analysis is GBNews economics and business editor Liam Halligan with On the Money. Liam. For you, Liam. So the local chippy will be helped as much as a big HQ of a bank. Is that fair?
It is, in the sense that what's being capped isn't the absolute amount you spend on energy, it's the unit cost of the energy. So if you use more energy, then you'll still pay more money, but the government will be helping you more pro rata. And look, a lot of big businesses, they insulated from wholesale gas markets, wholesale energy markets, because they do what we call hedge. They buy years ahead. Right. They have a lot of power with suppliers. They have bargaining power. Small and medium-sized enterprises don't, and that's why the government's focusing on small and medium-sized enterprises. And I've just put together some graphics just to guide us through, because when people talk about numbers on television, it sometimes goes above people's heads. So this is the cap on the megawatt hour of electricity. That's £211. There's a cap also on gas. That's £75 per megawatt hour. And what does that mean? Well, these numbers are less than half what we expected the price of power, electricity and gas to be this winter. So it is a significant saving. And this is applied directly to the bills of businesses. Businesses won't need to do anything or apply for this. It will just happen. It begins in October. And as you said, Mark, in your introduction, it only lasts for 6 months. Unlike the cap for households, which will be detailed on Friday in Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget, and that lasts for 2 years.
But before that 6 months, there is a review in 3 months' time. And clearly, if things do get better, and let's bear in mind, as we were saying earlier, petrol prices have gone down, oil prices have gone down, 165 average. The government actually has some breathing room then.
The review at 3 months is a good idea because we don't know where wholesale oil, as you say, and gas prices particularly are. Oil is used mostly for transport. 70% of the oil we use in the world is for transport. For electricity, it's all about the gas price because about 2/5 of our electricity is gas-fired power stations, but also it sets the price for other forms of electricity generation from nuclear and renewables and so on. And those prices, Mark, have been coming down. I keep saying this. The last 3.5 weeks, they're down by almost a half, albeit from very, very elevated levels. So it may be after 3 months, no more assistance is needed. But, as Labour is right to point out, it may be after 3 months, a lot more assistance is needed. It all depends on where these wholesale gas prices go on global markets, particularly in Western Europe.
How's it gone down with small businesses? What's the response been?
So I've been talking to many small businesses here on GB News for months and months and months. I personally feel that a lot of journalists dropped the ball here. We didn't focus at all on businesses, the fact they have no energy price cap, and a lot of businesses got really frustrated with a lot of journalists. I can tell you that for nothing. I think the fact that it's come late, businesses are sort of taking that on the chin, but this is a significant move by the government to put a price cap on the unit cost of energy that's half of where we expected energy prices to be this autumn is a very significant move. And at the same time, as you said in your introduction, Gloria, if you use more energy, you will pay more because it's a cap on unit cost. So there is a big incentive in here for firms to use less. So as well as getting cheaper energy, albeit a lot more expensive than last autumn and winter, firms will try to ration their use of energy and become more efficient.
And, of course, the lower price will help on inflation as well. But just looking at some other figures,
Absolutely.
just to put this into the mix as well, and this is the latest borrowing and debt figures. In terms of the borrowing, 11.8 billion for this August, twice the level forecast by the OBR. And we're already being told that the OBR is not going to be able to run the slide rule over this budget on Friday. Is the government very anxious that literally, the figures are not going to add up?
There is, of course, concern because the government's taking a risk with this policy. It's an open-ended policy. They're guaranteeing a price cap, whatever the wholesale price. The government has to fund that difference. So this is, in some ways, a blank cheque. On the other hand, it is catastrophism, I would say, to predict, this is definitely going to cost more than furlough. This is definitely going to cost 200 billion pounds. Furlough is roughly 70 billion pounds, roughly what we spend on education each year. Lots and lots of money. We just don't know. And you're right, Mark, those former OBR estimates, Office for Budget Responsibility, does have borrowing much lower. But guess what? When those estimates were done, we were meant to be in the middle of a post-lockdown bounce back.
Yeah.
There were budget statements a year ago saying that it was going to 6-7% growth this year. All that was before the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. And when it comes to paying back the borrowing, then Liz Truss's position is we're going to grow the economy and we will be able to pay it back in the medium term because we're going to cut people's taxes, businesses and individuals, and that will grow the economy. My question is really about the people who don't pay tax because they are low paid and who are not in work, so they don't pay tax. People who actually need any help, where will they get it from?
No handouts. Yeah.
This is, of course, very controversial. Look, Kwasi Kwarteng is going to announce a lot of, not so much tax cuts. He's avoiding the tax rises that Sunak penciled in on corporation tax. He's reversing Sunak's increase in national insurance for firms and for workers. And there may be a cut in VAT. There may be a cut on stamp duty. We don't yet know. But it's controversial to do tax cuts at a time when, as you rightly say, Mark, the public finances are getting weaker and we're borrowing a lot more. No doubt about it. This is a radical move by Liz Truss, and she is loosening the fiscal purse strings because she would argue she expects the Bank of England to raise interest rates to tackle inflation. So tough over here, looser over here to get a policy balance.
Quick thought as well. We're hearing about the mobilisation in Russia. I gather you got some inside information about how much a ticket is to get out of Moscow and Russia, which a lot of people, young men, are trying to do at the moment.
Well, I'm a former Moscow correspondent for various newspapers. I've spent quite a lot of my professional life living in Moscow. I follow Russia very closely. And I'm hearing that the cost of a flight from Moscow to Armenia, which is usually a couple of £100 equivalent, is now more like 1,000 because lots of people are trying to leave. It should be made absolutely clear, Putin, and I followed his statement very closely this morning, he's not talking about mobilising students. He's not talking about mass mobilisation. He's talking about mobilising reservists. So the equivalent, if you like, of the territorial army in this country. Now, if you think of the reservists, Russia already has one of the biggest militaries in the world. If you think of the reservists as well, because Russia does have national service, a lot of people then stay in the reserves after that. We're talking about doubling the size of a potential pool of Russian soldiers. But be in no doubt, I've lots of friends, contacts in Russia. A lot of young people are concerned that despite this rhetoric, they are going to be conscripted.
Right. Keep an eye on that. Liam, thank you. See you a bit later.